Welcome back to Leo's Daily English. I'm your host, Leo.
And I'm Chloe. We're so glad you're joining us for another real-world English lesson.
Before we dive into today's topic, if you find our videos helpful, please take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. It really helps us continue making content for you.
That's right. Don't forget to ring the bell for notifications. Today, we are focusing on a very common situation: clothing shopping and fitting rooms.
We've all been there. You find a shirt you absolutely love, but you can't find your size, and you feel a bit embarrassed to ask for help because you aren't sure what to say.
Exactly. People often make mistakes like saying, "I want this big," or asking for the dressing room. Today, we're going to learn the correct terms like size medium and fitting room, as well as the polite request. Could I try this on in a different size?
Have you ever found yourself freezing up in the middle of a store? Like you're standing there, you're holding a piece of clothing you really want, but you suddenly feel this invisible wall dropping down right in front of you.
Yeah.
It's just stopping you from taking the next step.
Oh yeah, that wall is very real.
It is, right? Welcome to today's deep dive. Today we're looking at something that on the surface seems so simple, but is actually a complete masterclass in human psychology and social interaction. Our source material today is a fascinating educational video and strategy guide from the YouTube channel Leo's Daily English. It's titled English for Clothes Shopping, Sizes, Colors, and Prices, Real Conversation Practice.
And it really delivers on that title.
It really does. Yeah. Now, I know a YouTube video about shopping might sound a bit, dry at first glance, but we are going to investigate the psychology of language barriers in retail settings. We'll analyze why literal translations completely fail us in social interactions and explore how just a few highly specific, polite phrases can entirely change your experience moving through the world. Okay, let's unpack this, because this isn't just a vocabulary lesson.
No, not all.
It's a survival guide for social anxiety.
It really is a survival guide.
Yeah.
I'm glad you emphasized the subtitle of our source material today, that real conversation practice part, because that framing is absolutely crucial. Learning a language or even just learning how to navigate a new social environment isn't just about memorizing flashcards or staring at a list of vocabulary words.
Right.
Knowing the word for shirt or blue doesn't actually help you if you don't know how to deploy those words in a dynamic, high-pressure, real-world setting. Real conversation practice acknowledges that language is a live performance.
Yeah, a live performance is a great way to put it. And the setup of this video is so perfect for that. It features two hosts, Leo and Chloe, and they start the video with a really quick, friendly introduction. And, they do the classic YouTube thing where they ask the viewers to like and subscribe right off the bat.
Which they actually loop back to at the very end of the video, too, which is just smart structuring.
Totally. But then they dive straight into the content. And the source material is explicitly designed to address what I like to call the holy trinity of clothing retail: sizes, colors, and prices.
The big three. If you can master how to talk about these three variables, you can navigate virtually any retail clothing interaction on the planet. But as the video immediately shows us, getting to that point of mastery involves overcoming some significant emotional hurdles first.
That brings us right to the hook of this entire document. The source outlines a very specific scenario to grab our attention, and I'm going to just quote it directly here. It says, "You find a shirt you love, but you can't find your size. You feel embarrassed to ask for help." Honestly, reading that, I felt seen. It's so universally relatable. Think about the emotional arc of that tiny moment for a second. Finding a shirt you love is an emotional high. You see it on the rack, you touch the fabric, you imagine yourself wearing it to that upcoming event. You basically already bought it in your head.
You're emotionally invested.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then you flip through the hangers. Small, large, extra large. Your size isn't there. Instantly, that emotional high crashes into a wall of friction. The joy of discovery is completely replaced by the dread of having to initiate a transaction with a stranger.
What's fascinating here is how the creators, Leo and Chloe, are doing something highly intentional. They are identifying the emotional block before they ever introduce a single English vocabulary word. They understand that the barrier to entry isn't linguistic at first, it's psychological. And they specifically mention helping English beginners overcome this fear of asking questions while shopping.
Right.
Let's look closely at that specific word they use, embarrassed. The question we have to ask is, why do we feel embarrassed in a store?
Well, I actually want to challenge that premise for a second. Why should anyone feel embarrassed?
Yeah.
We're the paying customers. The staff is literally paid to be there to help us. It's a completely normal, everyday transactional relationship. So where is this embarrassment coming from? Is it just irrational anxiety?
It might seem irrational on paper, but neurologically it makes perfect sense. The embarrassment stems from vulnerability. Asking for help requires admitting you lack something. In this case, you lack either the knowledge of where the extra stock is kept, or you lack the language skills to ask for it smoothly. When you combine that baseline vulnerability of needing assistance with the massive cognitive load of having to formulate a question in a non-native language, or even just navigating an unfamiliar environment, the brain often interprets that social pressure as a literal threat. Your working memory is suddenly flooded.
Wow, a literal threat.
Yeah. You aren't just thinking about a shirt anymore. You're thinking about your accent, your grammar, whether the employee is busy, whether you're being a nuisance. That's a massive amount of mental processing happening in a fraction of a second.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like your brain hits the emergency brake because it's overwhelmed by the data it has to process. And what happens when we feel that level of cognitive overload? It almost always leads to avoidance. Think about how many people, maybe even you listening right now, have simply turned around and walked out of the store without the shirt.
All the time.
You evaluate the situation and subconsciously decide that the social cost of asking the employee for help is somehow higher than the reward of owning the shirt.
Yeah.
I always picture this specific situation. You're standing in front of a giant towering wall of folded jeans. It's just an absolute monolith of denim.
A monolith of denim. I love that.
You're holding one pair that almost works, looking around frantically for an employee who isn't already helping someone else. You're rehearsing what you're going to say in your head over and over again. And after 30 seconds of that rising panic, you just slowly put the jeans back on the shelf and walk out. You choose the disappointment of leaving empty-handed over the friction of navigating the conversation.
That scenario is the exact tragedy the source material is trying to prevent. It's a tragedy of missed connections. The store wants to sell you the shirt. You want to buy the shirt. But the transaction fails because the bridge of communication feels too precarious to cross. The friction you just described, that frantic mental rehearsal, uses up so much of our working memory.
Right.
When our working memory is flooded with anxiety about how we are going to be perceived, we lose our grip on the actual words we need to say. Our language skills temporarily downgraded.
Which is such a perfect transition into how the video actually teaches us to build that bridge.
Yeah.
Because Leo and Chloe don't just lecture us about what to say. The video uses Leo as the character who completely embodies this exact struggle we're talking about. He is essentially all of us when we are panicking in that denim aisle.
Yes.
The script uses Leo to demonstrate the pitfalls of what happens when we try to force our way through the language barrier without the right tools. And the contrast they set up between Leo's wrong expressions and Chloe's right ones is actually incredibly dramatic and funny.
It's highly theatrical, which makes it memorable. The strategy relies heavily on Leo making common, relatable mistakes. They give us two specific examples early on. The first is, I want this big, and the second is, where is the dressing room? These mistakes are like leaving fingerprints behind at a scene. They show us exactly how Leo's brain is working under pressure. They are highly logical mistakes that reveal the mechanics of real-time translation.
I have to admit, I chuckled a bit watching Leo's bluntness with, I want this big. It's just so direct. Imagine walking up to a retail worker, holding out a sweater, and just declaring, I want this big. It sounds almost aggressive, right? But if you put yourself in his shoes, you completely understand what he's trying to achieve.
You absolutely do, and that is why it's such a brilliant starting point for the lesson. Let's look at the mechanics of this error. I want this big is a classic direct translation from a learner's internal monologue. When you strip away all the complexities of grammar and etiquette, the core desire in your brain is simply, me want big.
Exactly.
Leo is communicating his basic need, but he's stripping away all the necessary social lubrication that English speakers expect. Furthermore, it lacks a specific unit of measurement. What exactly does big mean in the context of retail inventory? It forces the retail worker to guess. And most importantly, it completely lacks any politeness markers. In English, direct demands are often perceived as rude, especially in a service context where the dynamic relies on mutual respect.
So if I want this big is clearly too blunt and unhelpful, let's look at his second question. Where is the dressing room? I really want to pause on this one. Is dressing room actually wrong? Because to me, that sounds perfectly polite. It's a complete sentence. It asks a clear question. If I heard someone say that in a store, I would know exactly what they meant. I feel like I've even seen signs that say dressing room in big department stores. Would a retail worker actually judge you for saying that, or is it just less precise?
That is a very fair pushback, and it raises an important question about the difference between being understood and being contextually accurate. No, a retail worker is not going to look at you like you're an alien if you say dressing room. You will be understood, but it misses the precise retail vernacular. In modern English, dressing room often carries connotations of a theater, like a star's dressing room behind a stage, or a private area in a large formal home. It implies a place where you put on your own clothes, where you dress for the day or for a performance. Retail environments, however, specifically use different terminology to describe the space where you try on merchandise. Using dressing room is a near miss. It doesn't halt communication, but it subtly marks the speaker as an outsider to the specific culture of retail shopping.
That makes sense. It's like calling the trunk of a car the luggage box. People will know what you mean, but they'll also immediately know you aren't totally fluent in the terminology. So Leo isn't failing because he doesn't know English words. He's failing because he is missing the specific cultural context of those words.
Precisely. And it's crucial to recognize that Leo's mistakes aren't failures of intelligence. They are failures of context brought on by that cognitive overload we discussed earlier. When we are stressed, which we establish as the baseline emotion in the hook of this video, we naturally default to the simplest, most primitive sentence structures available to us. We lose access to our higher-level vocabulary and our nuanced grammatical structures. We retreat to the linguistic baseline.
It really is like reverting to a caveman state. I want this big is basically this verbal equivalent of pointing at a rock and grunting. It technically gets the job done. The other person knows you want the rock, but it certainly doesn't make for a comfortable, seamless social interaction for either the shopper or the retail worker. It creates a jarring experience that makes both parties want the interaction to end as quickly as possible.
Which brings us to the video's solution. If Leo represents the primitive, stress-induced baseline, Chloe represents the ideal state. She's the architecture of precision. She is there to counter Leo's mistakes and teach the culturally appropriate, precise terms that lubricate the retail interaction. And she does it with such an encouraging tone, which actively lowers the pressure for the learner.
Right. She completely changes the energy.
Yeah.
Where Leo just says big, Chloe steps in and teaches the phrase size medium. It seems like such a small tweak, but the impact is massive.
Yeah.
She corrects big to a standardized category. And the video actually spends a good amount of time deeply explaining the specific expressions for sizes and colors here.
And that standardization is everything. Standardizing language, small, medium, large, extra large, is absolutely crucial for the mechanics of commerce. When Leo says big, he is expressing a subjective feeling, big compared to what. But when Chloe teaches size medium, you're speaking the computer's language now. You aren't just giving an opinion, you're giving the employee a barcode they can actually look up.
Oh, giving them a barcode. I like that.
You are plugging the speaker directly into the matrix of the retail environment. You are no longer asking the employee to interpret your subjective desire. You are giving them a data point they can immediately act upon. You are speaking their language.
And Chloe also makes sure to emphasize the exact pronunciation of all these new clothing words. In the video, they actually slow down their speech so the viewer can shadow them.
Shadowing is such a powerful technique.
It is. Having the learner repeat size medium and really get the phonetics right builds so much muscle memory. And Chloe does the same thing with the location. She unpacks that near miss we talked about regarding the dressing room. She shifts the learner from Leo's dressing room to the correct retail term, fitting room.
Let's look at the semantic difference there, because it is subtle but brilliant. We talked about how you dress in a dressing room. It implies ownership of the clothes and a finished state of being. But you don't own the clothes in a store yet. You are there to evaluate them. Therefore, you go into a room to check the fit of an unpaid garment. You go to the fitting room, It changes the nature of the space from a private wardrobe to a temporary testing laboratory.
A temporary testing laboratory. Think about how knowing the exact term, like fitting room instead of dressing room, acts as a psychological shield for you. When you know definitively that you possess the absolute correct word for the environment you are in, that initial embarrassment we talked about on the hook just dissipates. You aren't guessing anymore. You aren't vulnerable. You have the key to the lock.
It gives you a sense of belonging in the space. You aren't an intruder fumbling around. You are an informed participant in the retail ecosystem. The correct vocabulary provides an incredible amount of psychological armor.
And to make sure that armor really fits, no pun intended, the video actually inserts a quick self-test right after these key points.
Oh, the 3 quick self-test questions.
Yes, they pop up on screen to test, if you remember, size medium versus big and fitting room versus dressing room. It's such a smart way to keep the learner engaged and ensure the knowledge is sticking before moving on to the complex grammar.
It forces active recall, which cements the vocabulary. So if knowing the noun is the first step, how does Chloe actually put these words into motion? Because she doesn't just act as a human dictionary. She doesn't just hand you isolated nouns like size medium and fitting room and wish you luck. She actually teaches you how to string those precise nouns together into a fully functioning request.
This is the culmination of the lesson. Chloe teaches the following polite request. Could I try this on in a different size? If we take a moment to break this sentence down into its modular components, we can really see its structural brilliance. It's a highly effective piece of functional language.
Let's investigate why this sentence works so well, because on the surface it just sounds like a normal question, but it's doing a lot of heavy lifting. Let's start with the first 2 words, could I?
Hold on. Why could I? Why wouldn't I just say, can I try this on? Isn't can also polite? We use it all the time. Can I have a water? Can I go to the bathroom?
That is a fantastic question. The difference between can and could is the difference between asking about capability versus asking for conditional permission. This is what grammarians call a modal verb. Modal verbs are words like could, would, should, might. In English, we use them to soften a statement. If you ask, can I try this on? You are technically asking, am I physically capable of trying this on? Or is it within the rules for me to try this on? It's a bit more direct.
Ah, I see.
By starting with could I, you are adding a layer of hypothetical politeness. You are instantly transforming a harsh demand, like Leo as I want, into an invitation for instance. You are acknowledging the other person's agency. You aren't demanding it. You are politely inquiring if the conditions exist that would allow you to do it. It is the absolute cornerstone of English politeness.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. It softens the whole interaction immediately. It tells the retail worker, I respect your authority in this space. Then we get to the core action of the sentence. Try this on. This seems like another area where literal translation would cause a problem. Why don't we say, could I wear this?
Because, again, it comes down to precision. Try on is what we call a phrasal verb, a verb combined with a preposition that creates a new meaning. You don't say, could I wear this? Wearing implies you bought it, you own it, and you are leaving the store in it. You don't say, put this on, because that just implies the physical act of getting dressed. You specifically try it on. The word try implies an experiment. It clearly communicates your intent to the retail worker. You are assuring them that the garment is still store property, and you are merely evaluating it to see if it works for you.
And then we reach the final part of the request. In a different size. I want to highlight the preposition used here, in des. This feels like a very common stumbling block for language learners. I can easily imagine someone translating their native language directly and saying, could I try this on with a different size or for a different size?
It is a massive stumbling block. Prepositions are notoriously difficult to translate. In English, we conceptualize sizes, and colors for that matter, as categories that a garment exists inside of. Think of medium as a box. You are asking if this shirt exists inside the medium box. Therefore, we ask for it in a different size.
So we have this beautifully constructed, highly polite sentence, could I try this on in a different size? But what makes this so powerful is that it isn't just a one-off phrase. Connect this back to the very title of our source material, which explicitly mentions sizes, colors, and prices. We have talked a lot about sizes, but this sentence Chloe teaches us is actually a perfect template to address the rest of the store.
It is an entirely modular template. Once you internalize the syntactic structure of, could I try this on in, you have unlocked a tool that can be used across the entire store. You can seamlessly swap out the end of the sentence to address the other variables the source title promised. Let's look at colors. If the fit is right, but you don't like the shade, you don't have to invent a whole new sentence. You simply swap the final noun. You say, could I try this on in a different color?
Or if you want to be even more precise, you could just say, could I try this on in black?
Yeah.
Or do you have this in blue? The video really goes deep into practicing how to ask for different styles with specific phrasing.
Exactly. The underlying architecture of the politeness and the request remains perfectly intact. You are just swapping out the final data point. And the same logic applies to prices, which is the third pillar of our source material. While you wouldn't say, try this on in a different price, you use the exact same polite foundation. You approach the worker and say, could you check the price on this? Or, could you tell me if this is on sale? You are still using that modal verb could to soften the request, and you are maintaining that respectful distance.
It's just so versatile. I look at it like a Swiss Army knife or a multi-tool for shopping. Once you have a firm grip on the base handle, which is that soft, polite could I, you can just snap on whatever different attachments you need for the situation. You snap on in a medium, or you snap on in blue, or check the price, and suddenly you can navigate the entire store flawlessly. You have gone from the frozen panic state of the hook to a highly capable, articulate consumer.
And something I really appreciate about the video was how Chloe handles the really difficult explanations. When a concept gets tough, they actually do a role swap.
Yes, the role swap.
Leo stops being the struggling learner for a second, and they trade places to demonstrate the flow of the conversation from both sides. It's a fantastic pedagogical tool. It shows the learner not just what to say, but what to expect the employee to say back.
It really completes the picture. It organizes the whole lesson into a full, natural shopping dialogue scenario. You see the entire interaction from the moment you walk in to the moment you pay. But it brings us to the underlying methodology of the entire source script. Why structure it this way? Why not just give the listener Chloe's perfect Swiss Army knife sentence from the very beginning and skip Leo entirely?
That is a great question. Why make us sit through Leo embarrassing himself with, I want this big? It seems like it would be faster just to say, here is the right way to do it. Memorize this.
Right. It would definitely be faster.
It would be faster, but it would be far less effective. The overarching script strategy relies entirely on the deliberate side-by-side contrast between Leo making highly relatable mistakes and Chloe stepping in to provide the correct terms. If we look at how human beings actually learn and retain information, showing the mistake first is a vital educational technique. It validates the learner's instincts.
I can completely see that. When you listen to Leo say, I want this big, your first thought is, wait, I've thought that before. That's exactly how my brain translates it. You instantly identify with him.
By seeing Leo struggle, the listener feels less alone in their own embarrassment. It neutralizes the shame we talked about in the very beginning. The video is essentially saying to the learner, look, here is a perfectly normal person making the exact same logical error your brain wants to make. It is completely normal. It clears away the anxiety so the brain is actually ready to receive Chloe's correction. If you just hand someone a list of perfect phrases without context, they don't appreciate why the phrases are perfect. They don't see the structural differences between a direct demand and a polite request.
It makes the information so much more sticky. Instead of just passively reading a textbook list of retail vocabulary words, the viewer is experiencing a tiny, relatable mini-drama. We have tension, Leo making a social faux pas, and we have resolution, Chloe providing the tool to fix it. Our brains are hardwired to remember stories and conflict resolution far better than we remember isolated facts. By resolving the tension created by the language barrier in real time, the video ensures that the phrase, could I try this on at a different size, is burned into the learner's memory.
It creates an anchor point. The next time the learner is in a store feeling that familiar wave of panic, they won't just try to recall a flashcard. They will remember the story of Leo and Chloe. They will remember the contrast between the blunt demand and the polite request. They will have a cognitive map to follow.
I think it is so important to validate that for you listening to this right now. It is perfectly okay to be the Leo in the real world. Everyone has a Leo moment when they are learning something new or stepping into an unfamiliar environment. Making the mistake, feeling that slight friction, is the absolute necessary first step toward acquiring the Chloe level of mastery. You can't get to the refined, polite request without first stumbling through the primitive demand.
That is the essence of real conversation practice. It is acknowledging the messy human reality of making mistakes and then providing the precise structural tools to elevate the interaction. It bridges the gap between theory and practice. And they don't just stop at the physical store either.
That's right, they extend the lesson.
They explore how these exact same phrases apply to online shopping inquiries. If you were chatting with a customer service bot or an agent online, typing, "Could you tell me if this comes in a different color?" uses the exact same polite scaffolding. The modality of communication changes from spoken to written, but the polite architecture remains identical.
It's incredibly practical. And they even tackle what I think is the final boss of retail anxiety, the after-sales return.
Oh, absolutely. The boss battle.
If asking for a different size is scary, asking for a refund or an exchange feels terrifying for a language learner. But the video emphasizes how to confidently put forward your needs for after-sales support. Using those same polite modal verbs, "I would like to return this," or "Could I exchange this for a different size?" It gives the learner the confidence to protect their rights as a consumer without feeling aggressive.
Which is exactly why Chloe ends the video with a fantastic summary segment. She pulls together a list of the top 5 core shopping questions from the lesson. It's a perfect distillation of everything they covered. And she takes a moment to briefly evaluate the practicality of the lesson, reminding the viewers that these 5 questions will cover 99% of their retail interactions.
It's such a supportive way to wrap up. Her teaching style is just full of encouragement, which completely relieves any lingering pressure on the learner. And then, of course, as we mentioned earlier, Leo and Chloe wrap up with one final reminder to like the video and subscribe to Leo's Daily English.
Standard YouTube practice, but well-earned in this case.
Definitely well earned. Let's take a moment to look at the journey we have just been on today. We started this deep dive looking at the sheer paralyzing terror of simply not being able to find a shirt size. We examined how that vulnerability, combined with cognitive overload, completely short-circuits our ability to communicate. We analyzed the pitfalls of our brain's default settings, looking at how direct translations like "I want this big" strip away social grace and leave us sounding demanding.
And we explored the genius of role swapping and shadowing to build actual muscle memory.
Yes. And finally, we uncovered the incredibly empowering nature of precise modular phrases. We saw how shifting from a dressing room to a fitting room and utilizing the grammatical multi-tool of "Could I try this on in a different size?" can completely transform an interaction from a point of friction to a point of connection, whether you're in a brick-and-mortar store, shopping online, or returning an item.
I want to remind everyone why this matters beyond just clothes shopping. This deep dive is a microcosm of human interaction. It is about how having the exact right phrase in your back pocket, understanding the subtle cultural context of the words you use, can completely eliminate the anxiety of navigating any new environment. When you possess the language of the space, you belong in this space. You remove the friction between what you want and your ability to ask for it politely and effectively.
It is all about removing that friction. I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over today as you go about your week. Think about the friction you experience in your daily life. How much of your embarrassment or your tendency to avoid a specific situation isn't actually about the difficulty of the task itself, but simply because you are missing one single, well-crafted sentence to unlock the interaction. Whether it's setting a boundary at work, asking for a favor from a neighbor, or navigating a complex customer service call. What other scripts are you missing in your life? Think about it. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive, and we will catch you next time.
I've definitely learned a lot today, Chloe. I realized that saying "I want this big" isn't the best way to get what I need.
You're right, Leo. It's much more natural to say, "Could I try this on in a size medium?" It makes the whole shopping experience much smoother.
And I'll definitely remember to look for the fitting room instead of calling it a dressing room from now on.
We hope these tips for clothes shopping, covering sizes, colors, and prices, give you more confidence the next time you hit the shops.
If you have any questions or other topics you'd like us to cover, let us know in the comments below.
Thanks for watching Leo's Daily English.
We'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.
Bye.